Hey guys, this is Bancho Gray. Here was Bancho Ethan. He and I just took gold vaccine to the last couple tournaments here in the EX6 format. We want to do a quick tournament report, compare our deck lists, and talk about golden vaccine going into the future.
There were four tournaments this weekend: an online regional and Ultimate Cup, and an in-person regional and Ultimate Cup at GenCon. I played in the online regional, where I finished 14th, and Gray played in the in-person events, where he finished 5th and 6th, respectively. Going into this tournament weekend, we collaborated on our deck lists, but we ended up with a few minor differences.
As you can see right here, the vast majority of our decks are extremely similar. Ethan and I both preferred consistency over blowout cards like Heaven's Judgment, so we're both running Yellow Memory Boost. I went the extra mile and ran 2 physical training. In exchange, Ethan ran an extra Emissary of Hope and an extra Waking the Golden Knight. Additionally, I was only running 1 Rune Mode in exchange for 1 extra level 5, whereas Ethan went with a straight 4 level 5s and 2 Rune Mode. So with those being the differences, Ethan, how did you feel about the 3 Emissary of Hope and 3 Awakening? I was personally a little worried about those cards breaking me occasionally. Did that happen to you at all?
Not really. In fact, I would even say that I liked seeing them in multiples sometimes. Being able to sometimes double emissary could be pretty broken. I also had times where I went into Magna X off of Golden Knight. My opponent did something to where I had to armor purge, and then I just did it again, or I did it on a second stack. So I actually didn't mind seeing multiples. I think there were a couple times when I had Golden Knight and I didn't have Magna X, or when I had Emissary, but I did not know what was in my security yet, where those cards break me up a little bit. But for the most part, I was pretty happy with them at 3.
Was there ever a situation where you was thinking like, oh no, this Yellow Memory Boost bottom deck with my Tamers? Because that's one of the things I liked about physical training, that I could play it and I could know, okay, the only card that I won't grab would be Digimon Emperor or Ukon. Literally any other card, I can just grab it off of this card.
So funnily, going into this weekend, pretty much up until almost the weekend itself, I was a big fan of training for the exact reason you stated. But I found that training not digging deep enough was actually messing me up sometimes. You can have that issue, like you said, with Boost, but I actually don't think I had a single time that I can recall across the entire tournament where Boost bot deck to Tamer when it mattered. It did happen, of course, but I don't think it ever happened where it messed me up. I also got lucky. I never ran into Boost under a memory floodgate, so I never had an issue where it's like, oh man, if I had training, I could use it. So for me, they were pretty much analogous.
See, that actually is one thing that did happen to me. One of my losses was actually against Rapidmon. One of those reasons I lost was because I actually had the worst hands that I'd gotten all tournament. This particular tournament was the regional. It was round 6, so the second to last round in that tournament. And one of the reasons I lost is because I was just trying to dig for a rookie. I had no rookie, no level 4 for the longest time, and I had played 2 memory boosts. But then, because it's Rapidmon, they naturally play the Terriermon memory blocker, so that really ruined me because all of a sudden these memory boosts I'd used, I couldn't actually make use of once I finally got pieces.
Right, and you can run into that issue with Ukomon as well, or sorry, Numamon. We might as well call it Ukomon. When the Chumon can also cause that issue.
Right. Now, I will say, to Memory Boost credit, the one thing that I do like about it is that you can cash in that memory in any situation, assuming there's not a blocker. I still enjoy, me personally, I still really enjoy the ratio of 2 boosts, 2 training. Not only can they be good in either situation, I basically get the flexibility to be like, okay, I have one of each in my hand right now. I can use whichever one I feel is most appropriate. So if I need to spend 3 memory, drop the boost. If I need to spend 2, drop the training.
If I was to go back, I agree with you. I actually would run training. However, what I would do is not cut into my Emissary and Awakening count, but instead I think I would drop the Ukos. Those cards were good the times I saw them, but I barely ever saw it. Even across the 9-round tournament, I think I used it twice. So that was crazy that for me, clearly that can perform well without it.
Yeah, that's crazy for me to hear. I was seeing Ukos just over and over and over, and I completely steamrolled people because sometimes I was able to get, for example, an Ukomon out and a Pillomon against something like, say, Purple Imperial, which I did run into multiple times, oddly enough, at the GenCon in tournaments. And they couldn't really do anything about my Ukomon because they had to be killing the Pillomon. So while they were lasered in on killing the Pillows, they had to leave the Ukon there, and I just kept moving up, searching again, get another card. I just kept snowballing and snowballing on them. And that's just one example. I was getting Ukon just all the time. So me personally, I love the card in the deck because when you're winning, it allows you to really speed up your game plan, because that is the one thing about this deck. It does take a while for you to finally win. Like, most victories take multiple turns of you walling off your opponent and setting up enough swings to finally go in for the kill. But Ukon allows you to kind of rookie rush in a way that helps you speed up the number of turns it takes for you to win.
Right, that makes sense. I guess my experience was just based off of, I don't know why, but I just barely ever saw it. So.
Now, one card that I know did well for both of us is Pillon. I loved for Pillon, and I think you did too.
Yes, it was good in almost every single game I played. And the only games where it wasn't good, I won any. So it was huge. Even some games, I feel like it wasn't my other cards that won me the game. I mean, of course, like Magna X is the one that's doing all the checks. But the fact that I had Pillon just put my opponent in a position where they had no real way to do anything about what I was doing. And yeah, it was just a straight up game winning card. I'm very glad that I chose it.
I would say that the one issue I had with Pillon is that it was completely useless in the mirror. So when it came to my losses, my one tie on day one was against the mirror. One of my losses on the next day was again against the mirror. I actually never beat the mirror on either day. I either tied to it or lost to it, which the mirror is incredibly difficult. I think you would agree with this.
Yes.
I wish that there was a rookie that I could use in this deck that would actually work well into the mirror, but unfortunately, I don't think that rookie really exists.
Yeah, and that's the issue. There's really not any card that you could be running there, at least in terms of a rookie, that is going to help with that matchup. I was pretty lucky that I never played any other decks running Magna X, so I just never had to deal with it. I did kind of spec with that thought in mind that Numemon was going to be incredibly popular because it's doing well. It's half of every tournament top. 7 Great Demon Lords, even though I think it's really only like a tier 2 deck, has been incredibly popular. I guess a lot of people just really find it to be a cool deck, and so it's being played a lot. And then Imperial Dramon has also picked up a lot of steam over this format. I feel like by the end of the format, the Magna decks have started to fall off a bit, at least in terms of the player base. And so I guess I got lucky, but I also was intentionally not specking for that matchup.
Yeah, Imperial Dramon was actually a very common deck at GenCon as well. The Pillon extremely helped a lot to secure wins against that deck. Now, I suppose the last cards I want to talk about are actually the babies. So you were going with 3 Toko, 2 Naro. I went with the opposite of 3 Naro, 2 Toko. And so, speaking for myself, whenever I found myself with a Tokomon under Magna X and it was mid-game, I always wished it was Naro instead. Because a very common tactic that people like to use against Magna X, especially like decks like Numemon or some odd security-controlled decks that run Etamon, they love to taunt the Magna X to force it to swing when it does not have protection. And the Nyaromon inherently counters that counterplay against Magna X. Additionally, like even outside of that counterplay to taunt, it also just allows you to swing Magna X, proc the protection mid-attack without you having to use any other card in hand. Because I think what some players will agree with, people who have played Gold Vaccine, is that sometimes you're in a situation where you don't want to commit to the risk of attacking before you've procced your protection. So sometimes you might feel pressured to use a TK in your hand just to proc the protection, but then that might lose you out on a card that would automatically proc it otherwise. So just having a card built into the Magna X to allow you to get the protection every time you swing it's immaculate. I am a huge proponent of Nyaromon in this deck.
I 100% agree. I think across the tournament, Nyaromon saved my butt so many times where I was swinging and, like you said, I needed to proc my effect, but I didn't want to give up the swing. That's the other big thing, is that you can swing, restand as part of that swing, and then your opponent, if they have something they were going to do, you're now immune to the effects. But beyond that, you're also getting the DP boost, which is big as well, because I had times where opponents would try to set up a blocker on me, or maybe if like the Rapidmon matchup, they're trying to throw down a Mega Gargo that's going to be sitting at like 14k or something like that. And being able to swing, boost my DP, and then still be able to swing again after that was huge. I definitely think after this tournament, I would bump to your ratio of at least 3-2, but I could honestly even see doing 4-1. That card was just, it allows you to outplay so much of the way that people try to beat Magna X. You kind of just say no, as long as you've got security to spare. It's just huge.
Exactly. And none of this is even talking about the memory gain. I actually had times where the memory gain was incredibly relevant too, because that allowed me to do something like slap down a Magna Angemon for a recovery in addition to a drain, and then do something else to drain out something, or to set up another blocker or something. Like, just that additional memory control is just huge.
I agree. And especially if you have the BT1 TK out, You're starting your swing, you go up to 4 memory. That just gives you a ton of stuff you can do from there. And you may have other memory gain that you can proc as well if you have like the BT14 TKs or the BT14 Patamon and sources. Yeah, it's just great. I even had one game where I swung into Ragna, used the effect, my opponent blocked it, and then I had to armor purge. But since I had enough memory, I was able to go into Magna X again.
Oh.
Just a hard digivolving on top of a 5, and now I'm bigger than it, and I just beat over it. So that was pretty nice.
Another funny interaction is, so another card we haven't talked about is Salamon. Now, you and I have talked before. I know that you weren't super hot on Salamon. Like, I think you just saw it as like, well, here's another rookie I can run that's okay. Me, that 2K Drain Inherit actually came up a lot. And I actually loved how it interacted with the Naramon, because that allowed me to engage and attack with Magna X, proc protection, gain a memory, and even drain on a rookie, which that was often the case where I ended up doing that. And that I even stole a game against a security control guy who just forgot about the Salamon Inherit, and he didn't order his swings in such a way, like he should have swung this as rookie first, but he didn't. So because he swung in with his level 6 first, I ended up just deleting his rookie, like in the middle of his attacks, and he was just like, oh, I forgot.
Yeah, it's really easy to forget that Salamon Inherit is all turns. It's very easy to proc too, because you can proc it with your own effects, but you can also, like you said, if your opponent just swings into security, okay, you lost the security, so there's 2k off of something. Even sometimes that can matter for if you restand Magna and now suddenly you're big enough to block something that maybe you weren't before. Of course, that's kind of going to be a rare occurrence with Magna's huge DP, but it can happen.
Now, I think about the last card I do want to talk about is maybe the worst card that we both felt we had to run, and that was Gold Vidramon. The only thing I want to say about it is that it is a level 4 armor vaccine, and that is why I ran it.
Pretty much agree there. I will say its 2k drain did come up in one match. And it was pretty funny. I'm like, oh wait, if I do that and then I go into this, now I can drain off that 8k. I think I went into Angelo Menace on it or something afterwards. But yeah, outside of that, it's pretty bad. I could honestly see cutting it and just doing the 8 rapids, but I feel like you're getting a little risky because I had a couple games where I had Patamon and I did not know what was in my security, and I had to move out the Patamon, and then you look and it's like, there's no level 4s. And that feeling is just rough. If you haven't had time to prep security yourself and you don't know what's in there, yeah, it's rough to miss. So I would love if they made another Rapidmon. A third Rapidmon would be huge for this deck, even if it was just like, okay, just to be able to run more actually good target. So Rune Mode, how did you feel about only having the 1?
This might sound sacky, but I had it every time I needed it. I don't know what else to say. I have been running 2 for a long time, and I strangely felt like I was seeing it too often. That might sound strange to say, but I just decided, kind of a last-minute decision, I'm just going to cut it down to 1 because I just want another level 5, because level 5 is another card that allows you to climb up into Magna X, and it has other applications too for removal, so that's why I decided to do that instead of the 2 Rune Mode.
After my tournament experience, I think you might be onto something there. There were definitely times where I'm like, man, I wish I had a level 5 in hand right now, and Rune Mode was sitting there, and I'm like, this is doing nothing. I don't know if it was just the matchups I ran into or what. I ran into a lot of people playing like big body decks, and in those matchups, Rune Mode just doesn't really do a lot unless you can, swing it in and blow up their stack. Obviously, it's in there for things like Imperial, Numamon, even honestly the Mirror. If you can get it out when your opponent is sitting at Patamon and raising, that's amazing. But just those scenarios weren't coming up for me that much. And it did also feel like I was doubling down a little bit with Digimon Emperor, where those were kind of trying to accomplish a similar type thing. And the Digimon Emperor's slowdown in most of my matches was sufficient. So there were lots of times I didn't have it. So I think going back, I might have swapped. I will say, though, it did win me the very last round of the tournament. I used both Rune Modes. I think my opponent was not expecting the second one, and it really messed him up because he was kind of sitting there not able to do anything for about 4 turns.
What deck was that you were playing against?
Rapidmon X.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I kept going into Rune Mode, and it was too big for him to block.
Yep.
So he would lock it down, but then I would just get the setup again because he's, okay, locked down my Rune Mode, but he can't kill it because he can't swing at me because I'll block with Magna X. So we kind of just ended up in this stalemate. That game was actually insane. It was 49 minutes, game 1. So that was just a match.
Wow.
At the very end, he had out 6 bodies on board, I think. And my final board, where I board wiped him actually, but going into that, I had double Magna X, double Rapid X. He had de-digivolved my Rune Mode, which put another Rapid X on board, and so I went on into a second one for an 8k drain on his entire field, which just wiped everything except for like one Mega Gargo. It was brutal, and I don't think he was expecting it, but yeah, it was pretty insane.
Wow. Okay.
So another card I wanted to talk about is Heaven's Judgment. So we both opted not to run. How did you feel about that?
So Heaven's Judgment can do a huge blowout, but I had been playing in the deck for a long time, but I kept finding myself feeling like, I mean, yeah, this will kill something when I'm in a losing position, but it costs 7 memory to play, unless I have a Rapid X out, in which case, like, each copy of Rapid X will reduce the cost of Heaven's Judgment by 2 because of how Rapid X works. But I kept finding myself feeling, you know, this card doesn't actually even out Magna X. It can help against like a wide board, but I actually feel like the deck already has enough tools to deal with that, which I actually do feel that way, that the deck works perfectly fine against wide boards as long as you see stuff like Rapid X, which you're more inclined to see. So I decided that the deck didn't really need Heaven's Judgment.
I agree with that. There were a couple of matchups that it would have been useful. Ragnarlord, for example, I found that to be a surprisingly difficult matchup, and being able to just blow up their stack would have been nice. But for the most part, I didn't lose any matches where I would have liked to have it. So I feel like the deck, like you said, works fine without it. The other thing is, I'm dealing with wide boards. We both opted to run 3 Rapid X. I know the most common ratio for the deck is actually only 2. And I personally think that's a mistake, because even though Rapid X is significantly worse than Magna X, you definitely want to see Magna X. Rapid X is like the card you want if your opponent tries to go like, oh, it's Magna, I'll just swarm. Then you go, no, you won't. And it's against Nuamon, for example, you kind of need to see both Rapid X and Magna X to have any chance of winning. Unless you can, if you sit a Rapid out there and they can't deal with it, it's kind of an auto win. But outside of that, you kind of need to see both. So I think having it at 3 was really nice.
Yeah, I agree. And Rapid X is actually easier level 6 to make between Magna X and Rapid X. That is the one advantage Rapid X actually does have over Magna X, is that it can go over any of the Rapid Mons without any other card. Magnamon requires another card, be that Awakening of the Gold Knight or a level 5, whereas Rapid X can go over a level 5 normally or just over any of the Rapid Mons. The only card it doesn't interact with is a Gold Vidramon, which is a little annoying. It's part of the reason why that card is not super great, but we still play it because sometimes you know you have the Awakening or you know you have level 5, and that will allow you to get to the Magna X.
Right, exactly. So another couple cards we weren't running. Neither of us ran Patamon. Neither of us ran the promo Patamon, the P122, I believe, Patamon. What did you think about that? I know Patamon is one that we both hate.
Yeah, I tried Patamon a lot, and I decided I hated it. That's part of why I went to Yellow Memory Boost, because with Patamon, I'm almost always trying to find a Digimon, but I hate the fact that I have to invest 3 memory to do that, and that 3 memory I invest almost never comes back. Whereas with Memory Boost, you can at least refund 2 of that 3 memory you paid. But with Patamon, you play it, it will just die, usually, and then that's it. That was 3 memory wasted, and now I'm like a little bit behind because now I can't refund that memory in any way. So I don't like Patamon. I'm probably never going to play it again in this deck if I do keep playing the deck. When it comes to, what was the other card?
The promo Patamon.
Right, when it comes to the promo Patamon, I haven't actually tried that. I will admit, though, it does seem like it could be good, because you can do things such as play it, search security, get something, and then trigger TKs for memory gain, or like maybe a Patamon inherit if you have that. So it does actually look good, because it can be a rookie you can play for very cheap. I haven't tried it, though, so I don't want to say too much.
Right, that makes sense. I tried it out some going into practice for this tournament, and I found it kind of situational, but I also ended up finding Salamon kind of situational. I feel like a lot of the bill cards, when you're getting past the main core of the deck, they're kind of just like they either come up or they don't. So I know, like you said, Salamon was great for you. For me, it was mediocre. It was practically a vanilla. I think I only used its effects maybe 3 or 4 times across the entire tournament. So I definitely feel like there were times when, for example, I was hard playing a level 3 to digivolve it into a Rapidmon or something like that. And in those scenarios, I definitely would have rather had the Patamon. Other instances where, like I had just a brutal loss to Imperial Dramon, where they were breaking on a 4 for multiple turns. And I saw like all of my Patamons, literally all 4 Patamons, 2 in my opening hand. But I had no way to alter security. I never saw any TKs. so I could not adjust those in security, and there were no 4s in there. So, having the Patamon as an extra card to both check security, but also cycle it if you need to, I think could be helpful. It can also, if your opponent happens to hit Emissary in security, you can play it off of that if you want to as well. So that's kind of cool, I guess. But anyway, yeah, I don't know that it's great. This is kind of one of those decks where when you get into the fill slots, like I was saying there, it's like, all right, well, I've already got all the good cards. Now I just need to figure out how to make it a 50-card deck. But maybe that one could be decent in that slot. I will say it's terrible. Minus 2k to your opponent's security Digimon, and a deck that does not need that.
Yeah, like, it's weird. That effect feels like it was designed for Sylphimon, but that card doesn't work in Sylphimon, really. So, yeah, pretty unusual card. So when it comes to the future of this deck, we've just now ended EX6. We're now moving into BT17. The two big decks that are going to come out of BT17 are going to be Ancient Garurumon and Dexdor Goromon. Talking about those two really quickly, Dexdor Goromon is interesting because that deck is all about Collision, and Collision does work against Magna X. Even though Magna X is immune to Digimon effects, Collision technically affects the player, so Magna X actually will still be forced to block when he is attacked by a Digimon with Collision. So Dexdor Goromon does have a way to force the Magna X to block. However, in those situations, what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to swing Dor Goromon, force you to block, they die, then they evolve to the Dexdor Goromon and trash, so they live. However, that's still not going to completely out the Magna X, so I'd have to play the matchup more. The deck definitely has tools to play around Magna X, but I don't think the deck is a hard counter to Magna X, so to speak. What would you think, Ethan?
I agree. I think it can do a lot of interesting stuff with forcing you to block when maybe you don't want to if it has extra swings. It can also delete Tamers, which is a big deal because that kind of cuts into your memory refund turn after turn. But
the one thing I do want to point out, it can only delete unsuspended Tamers.
That's true. So usually your TKs are going to hopefully be suspended. I guess that could get your BT1 TKs, which would, that hurts your memory setter, but that's not always the end of the world once you're set up. It seems like the type of thing where if they aren't able to do something to just really boost up their DP, you're just going to kind of be able to swing past them or even swing over them if they're suspended. So yeah, I guess the big thing that does hurt you in that matchup is the fact that they might not be able to out your stack, but you also can't easily out their stack without using outside support like Heaven's Judgment.
Yeah, the Dex protection effect actually gets kind of tricky to play around. For example, Rapid X probably will probably never out the stack, because if they're on a non-Dex stack, you suspend it, try to attack it, they're just going to Dex evolve to protect themselves. So I think what's going to end up mattering a lot is the fact that Dexdor Gore is actually very sticky, and typically Gold Vaccine only has like one big removal per turn, so it can be a little difficult for them to out a Dex stack, so to speak. So the other deck would be Ancient Garurumon, which, to be honest, I think that's just going to come down to how quickly you open Magna X, because that deck is a rushdown deck. If you don't see Magna X soon enough, they're just going to rush you down, which is a weakness of this deck. This deck is weak to getting rushed down early. So, but at the same time, I do feel like the Ancient Garuru doesn't really hurt you that much. Funnily enough, the security bounce effect does proc your DP boost and protection again. But this is a yellow deck. It has ways of recovering back up even after its security has been removed. And even like security being removed by effect can even play into some cards such as Salamon, depending on the situation. So I feel like with that deck, it's really just going to come down to how quickly do they open.
Another thing to consider is that Ancient Guru's effect to bounce one of your security to hand only happens when a card is added to either player's hand on their turn. So if they do the normal play of swinging the hybrid to then Digivolve up into Ancient Garuru, at that point, if you only have Magna X on the board, they're not going to be able to bounce it to your hand, which means that nothing is getting added to your hand, and you can just block it at that point. So if they want to actually pull that effect off, they're going to have to play in a kind of weird way to not just be blocked by Magna X and go, well, okay, I lost that Digimon. Sure, I get to play a Tamer back, but they're not really gaining any advantage from doing that. Does that seem? That's correct, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Another thing with Ancient Guru still being a top deck, or likely being a top deck, is Numamon is probably still the best deck in the format. Maybe number 2, but I imagine it's still just going to be the best deck. So Digimon Emperor is going to continue being a really solid, probably borderline imperative tech. In some ways, Ancient Guru being around makes it actually a more desirable deck because you now have two different top decks that it locks down, whereas previously it was like it's really good against Numemon and it's just sometimes useful against other things that people play into it. But now it'll be like, hey, the best two decks in the format kind of get hard countered by Digimon Emperor. I don't think I would bump it above 2 still, even considering that. But if it becomes something where it's like those are the only two decks people are really playing at a top level, then maybe you could go to 3. But I think 2 is probably still enough. You see it a fair amount at that ratio.
So moving on to new tools for this deck, there's really only one new card that this deck gets going into Beat 17, and that's Shine Greymon Burst Mode Ace. So it may be hard to believe, but when that thing Blast Evolves, it can play any Tamer from hand. So you can play your TKs, you can even play Digimon Emperor, or you could even try teching in some more like interesting choices into this deck. There are some other yellow Tamers that can fit into this deck, but once you do that, you can Blast Evolve over your Magna X, you keep the protection, you get to play a Tamer, and you get to drain 5k for, again, all of your Tamers. The only part that this card cares about when it comes to yellow Tamers specifically is when it swings for the extra security checks. So you can kind of like play some really tricky Tamers in this deck if you want to kind of lean into the Shine Greymon Burst Mode thing, or you can just throw it in, and that's just like a way to turn a TK in your hand into a 5k drain on top of whatever Tamers you have on the board. So it's actually a card really worth considering, because one of the ways to sort of deal with the deck's problems, like that Dex Doruga thing, is to maybe drain it out such that even after the point that they Dex evolve, there's still DP drain down to 0. So it is a card definitely worth considering.
Yeah, and 5k per Tamer adds up pretty fast, especially since you're getting to play one for free, and this deck tends to want to amass Tamers anyway. The other thing that's really cool about this card is you still get to activate the on play of your Tamer, even though it's happening on your opponent's turn if you're blast evolving. So that's really cool as well, because you can trigger your TK if you want to, just get some free security cycle, for example. So that's pretty nice. There may be other Tamers, like Gray was saying, that could potentially be used in conjunction with this, though I don't think you'd want to focus on it too heavily. Just in general, though, having the level 7 ace option is a really nice pickup here, because you're normally able to sit at an invincible Magna X at most times. So that always being an ace threat that is going to just blow up a stack if you really need to is really nice. And then the security attack plus effect can also be pretty cool, because as we mentioned earlier, this deck can sometimes struggle to end the game, and being able to just pick up 2 more checks on your turn once it comes back over can be really nice. If you're going into a deck where you don't need to worry about security really, you can just suspend a couple Tamers, swing for 3 checks. Maybe if you've got one other body, at that point you're likely nearing game. So yeah, it's a pretty cool tool. It's probably still worse overall than Rune Mode, but I think it could be an interesting thing to experiment with, maybe 1-1, or if you really want to lean into it, you could try it at 2 with 0 Rune Mode, just to see it a little bit more often. The other thing to kind of mention with it is it can be somewhat of a soft replacement for Heaven's Judgment, but the drain has to be on only one Digimon. So even if you have a large number of Tamers, you can't do like mass board drain with it. You can only drain out a single step.
As long as this deck is not hit, Ethan and I are still expecting it to be very good going into the future. Japan is all the way up to BT18, and I believe, what was it you said, Ethan?
The Grand Asia Open. It topped at, I believe, at least 2 of the countries in the Grand Asia Open, maybe 3. So the deck is still doing very well, even all the way up to BT18. And that's without really getting any new support. Like you said, it picks up 1 card in BT17. I don't think anything in EX7 or BT18. So it's basically just the core deck right now, still doing well in multiple formats in the future.
Yeah, it really shows the power of Patamon, Magna X, Emissary of Hope, whichever of those problem cards you think it is. As long as those cards are around in this combination, this deck is probably going to be very good up until Bandai does a huge amount of power creep. I know that I'm really happy with my performance. I was hoping to do top 8 in at least the Ultimate Cup. I was really happy to do top 8 in both of those tournaments at GenCon. I hope that this video kind of serves as like a starting step for anybody who wants to play Gold Vex theme more, or maybe to learn a little more about what it does. So maybe you can like figure out a way to play against it, because as it stands now, the deck is still very powerful, and it's probably going to be very powerful until some sort of ban list happens.
And from what we've seen, there's no indication of that right now. So imagine this deck will be good for a while.
Yeah, so I hope this video has been helpful for you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I know I enjoyed playing it, and I hope to see you guys again. Bancho Gray out.
Bancho Ethan, signing off. Oh, were we not recording?
No, we weren't recording.
Oh, I thought we were recording. Okay.